Everything Everywhere All at Once lives up to the sprawling grandeur of its name,
even exceeding the many preconceptions the title lends itself to.
Directed by Daniels, a filmmaking duo composed and cleverly titled by Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, this cracked-out masterpiece of a film tackles generational gaps, existentialism, and being Asian, with a twist of multiverse mechanics and radical humor. Contrary to what I expected from the chaotic trailer, the multiverse is thematically integral to the plot. But the real achievement of said multiverse is that, in all its visual and conceptual splendor, it still manages to coexist with struggles grounded in the mundane, neither one displacing the other in importance. As hinted by its title, this movie strives for both breadth, the multiverse, and depth, a cultural experience rooted in reality. Evelyn is a mother, wife, laundromat owner, Chinese American, and as we come to find out together, everything else she can imagine. She speaks perfect Chinglish, Mandarin for the family she created, and Cantonese for the one she was born into, her English filling in wherever it best fits. From the first mid-sentence code switch, Daniels makes clear their commitment to accurate representation. The special care with which they write this multicultural family, even in dialect alone, affords to each character the dimension they deserve and deepens their portraiture of the Asian American household to a sculpture-worthy rendering, textures and contours included. But language is just the beginning. Like many immigrants who've uprooted their lives in pursuit of something better, Evelyn has sacrificed a lot for new life, both her and her family's. In the midst of organizing a birthday party for her estranged father and defending her messy paper trail in a tax audit, Evelyn is tired. The roles she juggles wear her thin and harden her into a no-nonsense, constantly bombarded yet strictly dutiful awareness that she simply does not have the time or bandwidth to sit with. As Evelyn shuffles from task to task, we see how her web of mundane callings split her apart. In their auditory heft, each noodle stirred, receipt shuffled, and washer door shut, pines for your finite attention as it does hers. And her husband Wayman, played by Ke Huy Quan, is sitting on divorce papers. Her daughter Joy, played by Stephanie Hsu, also wants to introduce her gay partner to Evelyn's straight-out-of mid-century China father Gong Gong. Yet Evelyn shoulders the weight of these stressors with poise because it's what she must do. If she falls apart, so does her family. The fate of the multiverse is in her hands, as she learns, but it's inextricably intertwined with her family, so they're actually just the same problem, which makes it arguably less frustrating than her taxes. In all seriousness, her family and the universe are equally important, which is part of why this movie works. It's kind of along the same lines as that Gandhi quote, "If you want to change the world, start with yourself." Except this film's version of that would be, if you want to stop your daughter from destroying the multiverse, start with your own generational trauma. And that's where the plot twists. Joy has an alter ego, an omnipresent nihilistic native to the Alphaverse by the name of Jobu Tupaki. She's presumably a first-generation Chinese-American daughter in this universe as well, which kind of tells us as much about her upbringing as the other descriptors. Jobu Tupaki, whose verse-jumping capabilities have been pushed beyond capacity by Alphaverse Evelyn, wants to confront this universe's Evelyn and/or destroy everything in her path, because in her omniscience, she sees everything and finds nothing. Yet Shu's Joy wears her darkness like a queen, a sympathetic one at that. Shu unveils in Joy the timid emotionality of a daughter who wants nothing more than her mother's approval, which dangles before her like a carrot on a stick. But the Jobu Tupaki in her would more likely compare her plight to the curse of Sisyphus, adding a dimension of tormented, maniacal futility to her every move. I mean, if your mom shamefully hides your queer identity and calls you fat in an attempt to address your hurt feelings, you'd probably at least consider annihilating the universe too. Everyone with an immigrant parent knows not to take these onslaughts personally, but no one has quite figured out how to stop them from leaving bruises. With deliberate nuance, however, Joy is not portrayed as a helpless victim. She's a grown young woman, and an omnipresent agent of chaos, let's not forget, who understands the cultural and generational gaps at play. But the poignancy in her and Evelyn's dynamic is that no amount of knowledge or maturity can fully subdue the hurt of a parent's misplaced disapproval. After all, Evelyn is a full-grown, independent woman herself, and she's carried her father's disappointment deep with her into her own motherhood. But there's much more to Evelyn than motherhood, daughterhood, wifehood, and the trauma she shares with Joy. The middle-aged mother and wife archetype is so often defined by its relationship with others, but in this film, Evelyn is not. Sure, she plays an integral role in running the family and laundromat, which she once upon a time risked everything for, but what about the many talents she never got to tap into and endeavors on which she never got to embark? That's where multiverse theory meets existential philosophy and where this movie unravels before it coalesces. Evelyn's ability to jump between alternate lives across universes reminds us of our own limitless potential and how every decision we make funnels us into a particular version of ourselves. It's absolutely terrifying when we think about it, and it lends itself to the nihilistic place where Jobu Tupaki finds herself sitting with a question to which she has no answer.
Because it's all just a pointless swirling bucket of bullshit.
To Daniel's credit, I've never seen a film illustrate the paradox of choice, all the regret and wonder it yields as artfully and humorously as Everything Everywhere All at Once. On one hand, this paradox adds weight to each and every decision we make, because who knows, maybe you'll end up a kung fu master if you leave your boyfriend at the right time and place. On the other hand, the limitless possibility of every moment is absurd to the point of comedy, because if someone came up with the idea of ratatouille in this universe, there must necessarily exist a raccoonie in another, where instead of a rat in Paris, it's a raccoon in a hibachi restaurant. It reminds me of the time my mom referred to Kanye West as Western Kenyan, and how that combination of words itself might have been our universe's first glimpse into a very specifically different pop culture landscape. Speaking of the limitless possibilities unlocked by multiverse theory, the use of unlikely algorithms to trigger verse jumping is pure genius. As characters staple office supplies to their forehead and dive rectum first into sleek trophies, laughter is effortless. It's the best way to get through all the absurd shit that life throws at you after all. Along with the exquisite procedure for verse jumping, each and every scene played out like it was born from the imagination of an unhinged child and actualized by the mastery of a seasoned filmmaker. A Jackie Chan-esque Ke Huy Quan weaponizes his fanny pack in the first fight scene, and Jamie Lee Curtis brings with her hints of the same terrifying aura she showcased in the Halloween slasher series, this time with a dash of inhuman athleticism and durability. Not to mention, nearly every surface in this film is just soft enough that any projectile body can and will fly through it, yet hard enough that it never fails to splinter upon impact. In the balance between cartoon-worthy action and mind-melting thought trains hangs the wide-reaching artistry of Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's both high and low brow, oscillating between your most esoteric ponderings and primal vices, yielding as much giddy entertainment as it does brain food. Stylistically, the movie exists somewhere between heartwarming Pixar and fleeting Wong Kar-wai, deftly paying homage to both iconographies in its own maximalist fashion. Then it draws you back to the undercurrent from which the chaos flows. In an existence where everything we do gets washed away in a sea of possibility, and every new discovery makes us feel smaller, what's the point? At the end of the day, the gap between your limitless imagination and the person you eventually become only grows larger, until all you're left with is an everything bagel of a black hole from which nothing can seem to escape. The only plausible answer here is love, of course, because it's the one thing that doesn't need to make sense for it to compel us oh so deeply. Unsurprisingly, it's sleeper agent Wayman who breaks this through to Evelyn, and thus we unlock another layer to Waymond, who prior to this point is more or less a squirrel. Once disguised as naivety, his wide eyes and big heart reignite hope in a jaded Evelyn, and again she finds meaning. Here, all we get are these few specks of time when anything makes sense, says Jobu Tupaki. Amidst everything, everywhere, all at once, the film pulls back and leaves us with something, somewhere, sometimes. For a movie that spends the majority of its runtime deliberately blowing and melting your mind, it's a remarkably simple yet comforting way to end. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. I'm back on YouTube again, and I will see you guys next time.